I was standing in my childhood bedroom on a Tuesday afternoon when everything I knew shattered. The red folder slipped from behind my mother's locked drawer, the one she thought I'd never touch. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were adoption papers, official documents with legal stamps and signatures. But what made my stomach drop wasn't just seeing the word adoption. It was seeing my name, Marcus Daniel Hayes, crossed out in blue ink. Above it, written in different handwriting, was another name entirely. Elijah Cole. The birth certificate beneath showed different parents, different lives, different everything. I heard footsteps in the hallway and looked up. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her face drained of color. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She didn't try to grab the folder. She didn't deny anything. She just stared at me with hollow eyes and said 5 words that would haunt me forever. "You were never meant to find those." The air between us turned to ice. I followed her downstairs, the red folder clutched against my chest like evidence at a crime scene. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded, waiting. "Explain," I demanded. She took a breath that seemed to hurt. "I adopted you when you were 3 days old," she began, her voice mechanical. "It was supposed to be sealed, private. You were never supposed to know." My legs felt weak. "Why would you hide this?" She looked at me then, and her expression wasn't guilt. It was defense. "Because telling you would destroy this family," she said firmly. "It would confuse you, hurt you, make everything complicated." I laughed, but nothing was funny. "So you just erased my past?" She flinched but didn't apologize. "I gave you stability, a good home, a real family." The word real felt like a slap. My entire identity, 24 years of knowing who I was, fractured into pieces right there in the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning of my life. Couldn't let it go. I pressed her for more. "Why keep the papers if you wanted it buried?" Her jaw tightened. "Insurance," she admitted quietly. "In case you ever got sick. In case we needed medical history." My anger flared. "So you kept my truth locked away for your convenience?" She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I kept it hidden because I was terrified," she finally snapped. "Terrified that if you knew, you'd leave. You'd choose them over me." The words hung between us like poison. This wasn't about protecting me from pain. This was about control, about possession. She hadn't hidden my adoption out of love. She'd hidden it out of fear that I wasn't truly hers, that I'd slip away if I knew the truth. I stared at the woman who raised me and realized I didn't know her at all. "You had no right," I whispered. She didn't argue. She just looked away. That night, I spread the papers across my bed and studied every detail. My birth name jumped out again, Elijah Cole. It felt foreign, like trying on someone else's clothes. But it was mine first. Before Marcus. Before everything. The birth certificate listed parents I'd never heard of. Renee Cole and Thomas Cole. There was a hospital name, a date, a time. All the pieces of a life I should have known. There was also a note clipped to the adoption decree, handwritten, faded. It mentioned a hospital administrative error and urgent placement. The language was cold, bureaucratic. But something about it felt wrong. Why would a mistake lead to adoption? Why hadn't my biological parents fought for me? I lay awake until dawn, the name Elijah Cole echoing in my mind. Sounded strong, honest, real. But I didn't know if I had the right to claim it. I didn't know who I was anymore. Marcus or Elijah, son or stranger. The next morning, I called the adoption agency listed on the documents. My hands shook as I dialed. A woman answered, her voice professional and distant. "I need information about a closed adoption from 1999, I said, giving her my details, both names, the case number. There was a long pause. Then I heard her breath catch. "Sir, can you hold please?" The line went silent. I waited 5 agonizing minutes before she returned. Her tone completely changed. "Mr. Hayes or Mr. Cole, this case was flagged years ago. There's a note here requesting contact if you ever called." My heart pounded. "What kind of note?" She hesitated. Your biological family has been searching for you. The room spun. Searching. They'd been looking. That meant they didn't give me up willingly. That meant everything my mother implied, that I was unwanted, that adoption was best, might be a lie. Can you connect me? I asked, my voice cracking. I'll start the process, she said gently. This might take a few days. 3 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office learning the truth. The story the attorney told me turned my stomach. In 1999, my biological mother Renee gave birth to me at a county hospital. Due to a paperwork mix-up, the hospital listed me under the wrong mother's name, a woman who'd given birth the same day and planned to place her baby for adoption. By the time the error was caught, I'd already been placed with my adoptive mother through an emergency foster-to-adopt program. Renee and Thomas fought for weeks to get me back. But my adoptive mother, who'd been waiting years for a child, hired expensive lawyers. She claimed the disruption would traumatize me. The judge sided with her. The case was sealed. Renee and Thomas were told to move on. But they never did. They kept my hospital photo. They filed requests for contact. They waited. And my adoptive mother knew all of it. She knew they wanted me back. She knew it was a mistake. And she chose silence. I confronted my mother again that evening, the lawyer's report in my hand. I expected rage to consume me, but instead I felt cold. Empty. They tried to get me back, I said. You knew they didn't abandon me. She looked at the papers like they were weapons. Then her face crumpled. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother cry. Real gasping sobs. I couldn't lose you, she choked out. I'd waited so long. I couldn't give you back. But even through her tears, I noticed something. She wasn't crying for me, for the child stolen from his real family. She was crying for herself, for the fear of being alone, for the shame of being caught. You stole me, I said quietly. She shook her head violently. I saved you. I gave you everything. You gave me a lie, I replied. Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard her weeping, but I didn't turn back. Some bridges burn for good reason. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet corner of the city. I arrived early, my palms sweating, my heart hammering. Then the door opened. Renee Cole walked in. She was tall, with dark curly hair streaked with gray and eyes exactly like mine, hazel with gold flecks. The moment she saw me, she stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Elijah, she whispered. It was the first time anyone had called me that. She crossed the cafe in seconds and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. She smelled like lavender and something warm I couldn't name. When she finally pulled back, her face was wet with tears. I knew you the second I saw you, she said, her voice shaking. You look just like your father. We sat down, and for 2 hours she told me everything. How she'd held me for 6 hours before the paperwork error was discovered. How she'd fought until her savings ran dry. How she never stopped hoping. I realized then what my adoptive mother had stolen. Not just me, but 24 years of this woman's life. 2 days later, I met the rest of them. Thomas Cole, my biological father, was quiet but warm. He shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug. Welcome home, son, he said, and I nearly broke. Then there were my siblings, Jordan, 21, and Sophia, 19. They'd grown up knowing they had a brother out there somewhere. Jordan showed me a photo they kept on the mantle. Me as a newborn, wrapped in a hospital blanket. We never forgot you, Sophia said softly. Mom told us about you every birthday. They asked questions carefully, respectfully. What I liked, what I did for work, what my life had been like. I told them some truths and skipped the painful parts. But the strangest thing was how natural it felt. Like muscle memory. Like coming home to a place I'd never been. They didn't feel like strangers. They felt like the family I'd been missing without knowing it. I wasn't forgotten. I was mourned. And now I was found. I didn't call my adoptive mother for 2 weeks. Every time I thought about picking up the phone, anger stopped me. But then something else bloomed beneath the anger. Something colder and more deliberate. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want revenge in the petty sense. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. I wanted her to face what she'd done, not in private where she could twist it, but in the open where she couldn't hide. So I started planning. Christmas was 6 weeks away. My adoptive mother always hosted a big dinner, her moment to play the perfect matriarch. She'd already texted me twice asking if I'd be there. I replied simply, yes, I'll be there. I didn't mention I'd be bringing guests. I didn't mention the reckoning that was coming. I just let her think everything was fine. Let her think she'd won. Because the bigger the illusion, the harder the fall. And this fall needed to be seismic. My adoptive mother called me 3 weeks before Christmas, her voice bright and forceful. I'm so glad you're coming, she said. We'll make it perfect. Just like always. Just like a real family. That phrase again, real family. I let it slide. Sounds great, I said evenly. She launched into details, the menu, the decorations, the guest list. Distant cousins. Old family friends. The people she wanted to perform for. It'll be intimate, she said. Just us and the people who matter. I almost laughed. She had no idea how intimate it was about to get. I'm bringing some guests too, I said casually. There was a pause. Who? Friends. I lied. People who've become important to me lately. She hesitated, but her need to appear gracious won. Of course. The more the merrier. I smiled into the phone. Thanks, Mom. The word tasted bitter. But I said it anyway. Let her think she still had me. Let her think the lie still held. As Christmas approached, my adoptive mother became increasingly controlling. She texted me daily with updates. She asked for my guests' dietary restrictions, their names, their backgrounds. I kept my answers vague. They're lovely people, I said. You'll like them. She didn't like that. She started calling instead of texting, her voice tight with questions. How do you know them? Where did you meet? Why haven't you mentioned them before? I could hear the fear creeping in. Some instinct was warning her. I've known them my whole life, I said, not technically a lie. I just didn't realize it until recently. She went quiet. Then she changed tactics. She tried controlling the seating, the timing, the flow of the evening. She wanted me next to her at the head of the table. She wanted her people close. I agreed to everything. Let her build the stage exactly how she wanted it. Let her think she was in control. Because the higher you climb, the farther you fall. And I was about to push. Christmas evening arrived cold and clear. I drove to the house I grew up in, my biological family following in a separate car. We'd planned the timing carefully. I'd arrive first. Get inside. Let my adoptive mother relax into her performance. Then they'd arrive. Renee had been hesitant. Are you sure about this? She'd asked the night before. Yes, I'd said. She needs to face what she did. Not in private. In the light. So at 6:30, I walked through the front door with a bottle of wine and a smile. My adoptive mother greeted me with a tight hug. You're here, she said, relief flooding her voice. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. The table was set perfectly. Candles flickered. Everything was exactly as she wanted it. Then, at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. She was in the kitchen adjusting platters. Can you get that? She called. I walked to the door, my heart pounding. I opened it. Renee, Thomas, Jordan, and Sophia stood on the porch, dressed carefully, their faces nervous but determined. Ready, I whispered. Renee nodded. I turned back toward the house. Mom, I called. Come here. There's someone I want you to meet. My adoptive mother walked into the foyer, wiping her hands on a towel. She was smiling until she saw them. Her face went white. She looked from them to me, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Mom, I said calmly. I want you to meet my biological family. The words hung in the air like a bomb. This is Renee and Thomas Cole, I continued, gesturing to each of them. My birth parents. And these are my siblings, Jordan and Sophia. Renee stepped forward carefully. Hello, she said, her voice steady but kind. My adoptive mother didn't move. She stared at them like they were ghosts. Then her eyes snapped to me, wide and horrified. "What is this?" she whispered. "Dinner," I said simply. "You invited me to spend Christmas with family, so I brought mine." Behind us, the other guests, her cousins, her friends, had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. My adoptive mother's perfect evening was unraveling in real time, and there was nowhere for her to hide. For a moment I thought she might collapse, but then her shock twisted into fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice shaking. She pointed at Renee and Thomas. "How dare you come into my home? How dare you manipulate my son?" Renee stayed calm. "We're not here to fight. We just want—" "You want to steal him?" my adoptive mother shouted. "You want to brainwash him into thinking I'm some kind of monster." Her voice was rising, cracking. The guests shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know what I gave him," she continued, her face red. "What I sacrificed. I raised him. I loved him. And you think you can just waltz in here and take him from me?" I stepped forward. "Nobody's taking me, Mom. I'm not a possession." She whirled on me. "You don't understand what you're doing. They abandoned you." "They didn't abandon me." I cut her off. My voice was loud now too. "You know they didn't. You've always known." The room went deadly quiet. Her mouth snapped shut. "Caught." I pulled the red folder from my jacket and held it up. "Do you want to tell everyone the truth?" I said. "Or should I?" She looked at the folder like it was a weapon. "Don't," she whispered. But I was done protecting her. I opened the folder and read aloud. The adoption papers, the lawyer's report, the hospital error, the sealed case, every detail. I told them how Renee and Thomas fought for me, how they were silenced, how my adoptive mother knew all of it and chose to hide it for 24 years. The guests stared in horror. Some whispered to each other. Others just looked at my adoptive mother, waiting. She stood frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I didn't steal him," she said weakly. "It was legal. The courts made a mistake," Renee said quietly, but firmly. "And you knew it. You could have corrected it. You could have let us be part of his life. But you chose silence." My adoptive mother's eyes filled with tears. "Because I loved him." "Love doesn't hide the truth," I said. "Control does." For the first time in my life, I saw my adoptive mother powerless. She looked around the room, at her guests, her cousins, her carefully curated audience, and saw judgment in their eyes. She'd been exposed, and she knew it. "You want me to choose," I said, my voice steady now. "You always wanted me to choose. You or them. Your version of the truth or reality." She nodded desperately. "Yes, choose me. Choose the life I gave you." I shook my head. "I'm not choosing between you and them, Mom. I'm choosing me." The words echoed in the quiet room. She stared at me like I'd struck her. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means I'm done being owned," I said. "I'm done being controlled. I'm done living in the story you wrote for me." Her face crumpled. "But I'm your mother." "Yes," I said. "And so is she." I gestured to Renee. "And I get to decide what that means now. Not you." Silence swallowed the room. My adoptive mother stood there, trembling, realizing she'd lost the power she'd clung to for 24 years. I expected her to break down, to apologize, to beg, but instead she went cold. "So that's it," she said bitterly. "After everything I did for you, you're just going to throw me away." "I'm not throwing you away," I said. "I'm setting a boundary." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "A boundary? That's what you call betrayal now." Renee spoke up then, her voice gentle but firm. "You're upset. I understand. But this isn't betrayal. It's healing." My adoptive mother turned on her, eyes blazing. "You don't get to tell me what this is. You don't know him. I raised him. I know him. Then why did you lie to him his entire life?" Renee asked. The question hit like a hammer. My adoptive mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that absolved her. "I want you to leave," she said finally, her voice breaking. "All of you, get out of my house." "Mom," I started. But she held up a hand. No, I'm done. If you choose them, you lose me. That's how it works. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt grief settle in my chest. Thomas stepped forward then, calm and steady. We don't want you to lose your son, he said to my adoptive mother. That's not why we're here. She scoffed. Then why are you here? Because Marcus Elijah deserves the truth, Thomas said. And so do you. She frowned, confused. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to her. This is the hospital report from 1999, the one your lawyer buried. It shows the error. It shows how we tried to reach you, how we asked, begged for co-parenting, visitation, anything. My adoptive mother stared at the paper. We didn't want to take him from you, Renee added softly. We wanted to share him. We wanted him to have both families. You're the one who made it a war. My adoptive mother's hands shook as she read the document. Her face shifted, from anger to confusion to something that looked almost like shame. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice had no strength. We're not, Renee said, and you know it. My adoptive mother looked at me, desperate. I was protecting you. No, I said quietly. You were protecting yourself. She crumpled then. Not dramatically, just a slow collapse inward. She set the paper on the table and walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? I asked. She didn't look back. Away from this. Mom. Don't, she said, her voice hollow. Just don't. She climbed the stairs and disappeared into her bedroom. A door closed. Silence filled the house. The guests looked at each other awkwardly. One of her cousins stood. We should probably go, she said gently. The others agreed. Within 10 minutes, the house emptied, except for me and my biological family. I stood in the middle of the dining room, staring at the untouched turkey, the perfect table, the candles still flickering. Renee touched my shoulder. Are you okay? She asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. Let's eat, I said finally. No point wasting the food. So we did. We sat at my adoptive mother's table and shared Christmas dinner. Just the 5 of us. It wasn't joyful, but it was real, and that was enough. I thought I'd feel relief, victory even, but instead I felt grief. Heavy, suffocating grief. I'd exposed the truth, yes. I'd reclaimed my identity, but I'd also broken something that couldn't be fixed. My adoptive mother had raised me, fed me, tucked me in, taught me to ride a bike. She was flawed, terribly, deeply flawed, but she'd also been my mom for 24 years. That didn't just disappear because she lied. After dinner, I sat alone in the living room while my biological family waited outside. I stared at the Christmas tree, the ornaments I'd hung as a child, the stockings with our names stitched in red thread. 2 families, 1 broken truth. I didn't know how to hold both things at once. The love and the betrayal, the gratitude and the anger. I wanted to hate her cleanly, or forgive her completely. But life isn't that simple. People aren't that simple. So I sat with the grief and let it exist. Maybe that was the only honest thing left to do. 2 days later, a letter appeared under my apartment door. No envelope, just folded paper with my name on it. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Inside was a confession. Not an apology, she didn't say sorry once. But she admitted everything. The fear, the control, the lies. She wrote about waiting years to adopt, about the desperation that consumed her when she finally held me. She wrote about the lawyers telling her to bury the case, about convincing herself it was best for me. She wrote about watching me grow up, terrified every day that I'd find out and leave. I know what I did was wrong, she wrote, but I don't know how to undo it. I don't know how to stop being afraid. The letter ended abruptly. I can't lose you, but I think I already have. I folded the paper and set it on my counter. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough. But it was honest. And maybe that was a start. Or maybe it was just another form of control. I wasn't sure yet. I wrote back. Not immediately. I waited a week. letting my thoughts settle. When I finally sat down, I didn't soften my words. "You don't get to decide what happens next," I wrote. "I do. And here's what I need: honesty, always. No more secrets. No more manipulation. If you want a relationship with me, it's on my terms, not yours." I listed boundaries: clear, firm, non-negotiable, weekly therapy for her, transparency about my biological family, space when I needed it, respect when I asked. "This isn't punishment," I wrote. "This is clarity. You can accept it or walk away. But I won't live in your fear anymore." I ended with something I'd been afraid to say: "I don't hate you, but I don't trust you, and trust has to be earned back." I left the letter in her mailbox. I didn't wait for a response. I just drove away, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't forgiving. I was just clear. And clarity, I realized, was its own kind of power. The following Christmas, I hosted dinner at my apartment. It was smaller than my adoptive mother's house, less formal, but it was mine. I invited both families. My biological parents and siblings came immediately. My adoptive mother hesitated. "Will they be there?" she asked when I called. "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if I can." "That's okay," I said. "The invitation is open, but it's your choice." On Christmas Eve, she showed up. She looked older, smaller somehow. Renee opened the door and extended her hand. "Thank you for coming," she said. My adoptive mother stared at Renee's hand, then took it. "Thank you for having me," she said stiffly. Dinner was awkward at first. Conversation stumbled. But slowly, carefully, it found footing. Jordan told a joke. Sophia asked about my adoptive mother's garden. Thomas complimented the stuffing. By the end, my adoptive mother was almost smiling. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, I'd learned, were enough. I no longer introduce myself as just Marcus or just Elijah. I use both. Marcus Elijah Hayescole. It's long. It's complicated. But it's honest. I wasn't stolen, I was lost. And then I was found. Not by one family or the other, but by myself. My adoptive mother and I still have hard days. She slips into old patterns sometimes, tries to control, to guilt, to manipulate. But I hold my boundaries. And slowly, painfully, she's learning to respect them. My biological family has welcomed me with open arms. I have Sunday dinners with them, game nights with my siblings, long talks with Renee about everything I missed. But I don't pretend the years apart didn't happen. I don't pretend it doesn't hurt. I carry both truths now. The life I was given and the life I was denied. Both families. Both names. Both stories. This is my name. This is my story. And I'm telling it my way. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe. There's more to come. Because the truth, no matter how messy, is always worth telling.